Hi, my name is Chuck Fall, and you are at a Green Renaissance Thursday meetup. And our topic in the last few weeks has been what can make the Green Party a winning party. We first had a presentation from Howard Schweitzer at Banking Monitor Reform Committee. He's a Green Party US, and he argues for a democratization of our money supply to liberate from the banking cartels. Emmanuel followed with a broad presentation that essentially calls for a militant democracy. Mark Rolifson followed with an appeal to end war, stop the empire, and as an imperative that would be important for Greens to be leading on. Tonight, to wrap up our series, John Spritzler, radical egalitarian, will present, and then I will close out with my remarks on what would make a Green Party, a Green movement, a winning movement. So, on that note, let's go straight to John Spritzler and take the video camera on yourself and share out with us. What is your recommendation for what would make the Green Party, the Green movement, a winning movement? Please, John.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to present 6 single sentence propositions to you, and they form the logical argument for what I think a revolutionary egalitarian party could do to be a winning party. And I'm not assuming that this is the Green Party. I'm just talking about a party doing the right thing, whatever, wherever it comes from. And and I'm going to put these propositions in the chat. I put the first one in, and in these propositions, when I wrote them, I was making reference to getting accountability for state crimes, which is a focus of a lot of people, and presumably a lot of people in the Zoom call here. But I'm using state crimes as just sort of a placeholder for any particular kind of reform to society that people think is important. Environmental reforms to stop toxic pollution, the reform of ending warmongering, and so when I refer to state crimes and accountability for state crimes, you can think of that as a placeholder for other very good reforms that probably we want and a lot of other good people want. Okay, so proposition number 1. Most, 85% to 90% of Americans would love to remove the rich from power, to have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor. And this includes people who voted for Trump. And you can see a link where I provide proof of that. Proposition number 2. In the chat now, most people think it's impossible to remove the rich from power, etc., because they believe too few others want to do that. And they believe this because any expression of this egalitarian revolutionary aspiration to remove the rich from power is censored everywhere. So people never see it expressed and make the logical conclusion that hardly anybody agrees with them in wanting to do that. And they also make the very sensible conclusion that they better keep their mouth shut about wanting to do it, because if they spoke out, people would think they were crazy or maybe even dangerous. And this even increases the sense that people have that nobody wants to remove the rich from power, and so forth. And by the way, when I say that people think it's impossible, of course, people point to the military force that the ruling class has, but the reason they think that we can't overcome that force is because of what I just said. There's too few people who want to build a movement to do that. Okay, moving along. Proposition number 3. I'm cutting and pasting it right now. Copy, paste.
And call John.
There it is. Proposition number 3. Of the people who want to remove the rich from power, etc., only about 1 in 1,000 want to do it because they want accountability for state crimes. Most have other reasons regarding how the rich treat them and those they care about, like dirt, openly and routinely. Proposition number 4. Cut and paste. When, and only when, the people who want to remove the rich from power succeed in doing that, will the people who want accountability for state crimes be finally able to make that happen? Obviously, the rich are the ones who committed the state crimes, and they will not make themselves accountable for their crimes, nor allow anybody else to do so. Ditto for the warmongering, et cetera, et cetera. Proposition number 5, cutting and pasting. Therefore, we should do what it takes to let people learn that they are the vast majority in wanting to remove the rich from power, because then, and only then, will they have the confidence to do what it actually takes to accomplish that goal, to build the organizations and mass movement, etc. And I have a link here about things that people could do when they have that confidence, or things we could do to help people gain that confidence. And I'll discuss that in more detail right after I finish with the 6th proposition, which is coming your way. Copy, paste. Number 6, when people who fight for particular good reform tell the public that they want this reform because it will make society a little bit closer to being the way they want it to be, which is with the rich removed from power, to have real, not fake democracy, with no rich and no poor, then they gain more support from the general public. They do not lose support, they gain support. And the evidence for this is in a video, the second half mainly of the video, of random people on the street telling me this, which is why I know it's true. And you can click on that video and watch it when you feel like it. Okay, now, the question now is, what might a US egalitarian revolutionary party do? Well, the strategy, as I say, is to do things to help people learn that in wanting to remove the rich from power, et cetera, they are, in fact, the vast majority, even though they don't currently think so because of that aspiration being censored. So there's a zillion things that such a party could do. And what I'd like to point out is that these are things that even an individual can do, or a few people, or 10 or 20 people, or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people. It could scale up very easily. So one thing is people can make a video or an audio recording of random person on the street interviews, like the one shown below in the article I said you can click on in proposition number 5. So I've made such videos. And if you ask random people in the street, do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea to remove the rich from power, to have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor? 85 or 90% will say it's a good idea or a great idea. I found that out by doing it in 5 different neighborhoods of Boston and also in rural New Hampshire. You could do it too in your own neighborhood. Find out for yourself. You don't have to believe me. And if you just happen to have some connection to a radio station, if you just happen to be on the board of directors of a radio station, for example, you could have the radio station do person on the street interviews asking this question, going all around the country. And the audience of that radio station would love seeing such a video. Believe me, they would love it. Of course, no radio station does that now. It's part of the censorship. Another thing you could do, which I did, which is a link to the earlier proposition video, is do random person on the street interviews asking people if they would support an organization more or support it less. If it said it was for egalitarian revolution, removing the rich from power, etc. And I did this, and you can watch the video. You see, you have the link in the chat. And you can see that almost everybody said they'd support it more. There was one exception that is sort of funny. I asked one woman, and she said she would support it less. But I was a little bit perplexed because she liked the idea herself of removing the rich from power and so on. I said, so why did you say less? She said, because I would assume if an organization said they were for removing the rich from power, et cetera, that they were lying, that they were only saying it to get more support, that they weren't really sincere. So I said, well, that's a good point. But what if you believe that they were sincere, then would you support them more or less? And she said, well, in that case, more. Now, another thing we could do is make banners, big banners with the words honk if you'd love to remove the rich from power, and hang these banners over on bridges over highways and let people hear all the honking. Ditto for banners about having no rich and no poor, and ditto for banners about having real, not fake democracy. There'd be a whole lot of honking, and people would hear the honking and they know why people were honking, and it would build confidence that we're not alone in feeling this way. So we could ask people in a specific zip code to pose for photographs, like the ones that you can see in the Proposition 5 linked article, Substack article that I'm reading from right now. And these photos, I have 500 of my neighbors in my zip code, Brighton, Massachusetts, proudly displaying a sign that says, "We the people want affordable housing for all." And to get it, we aim to remove the rich from power, to have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor. I have 500 of my zip code neighbors proudly holding this sign for a photo that I took of them. I put all these 500 photos on a large banner and displayed it in public places like the local branch library and in front of the grocery store where I took a lot of the photos. People love it. People love looking at the photos, seeing maybe someone they know, once in a while seeing themselves even. The Revolutionary Party could create a website that describes how there really can be an egalitarian society, like my website, pdrboston.org, describing how there could really be real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor, describing how it would be an extremely desirable and realistically possible society. It would not be describing a Bolshevik communist dictatorship. It would be describing something almost the opposite. We could make stickers like this one that say, let's remove the rich from power, have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor, and with the website at the bottom, pdrboston.org, and my sticker. And we could then have volunteers pass out these stickers to people in public places, like I'm doing right now. I mean, in my own neighborhood, about 3 days a week. People love the sticker, extremely positive response. I'm even getting unsolicited donations of money as an appreciation for just being there with the sticker. People can pass the sticker out in their own neighborhood so they can form face-to-face connections with their neighbors based on a shared egalitarian revolutionary aspiration. You know, because the ruling class can, when it wishes, shut down the internet, we need to create a movement based on face-to-face connections. So a revolutionary party could invite people to public meetings to discuss what laws ought to be in an egalitarian society. And then they could post notices in public places, such as the windows of small businesses with the permission of the owner, which I've discovered one often gets because I've done this. And they can put these notices about what the law would be if it were an egalitarian society and inform people about specific things that a genuine egalitarian democracy would do. Like, for instance, one that I have in this article printed out that you can see, it says Brighton egalitarians. In an egalitarian Brighton, it would be the law that squatting is legal, and explain why. People can make notices like this that say egalitarian society would make it illegal for people to be treated like dirt the way the rich treat us today. And I have linked to 25 concrete examples of the way people are openly, routinely treated like dirt by the rich. We could say these would be illegal, list them concretely. A revolutionary party would advocate for genuine egalitarian democracy and spell out what that means. And Chuck, with his Green Liberty, actually has posted a proposed platform plan for the Green Party that does indeed spell out exactly what genuine egalitarian democracy means. We could talk to people about this, talk about what the real alternative is to our fake democracy. A revolutionary party would persuasively refute the ruling class's divide and rule lies. I linked to the way that I do that for a lot of these social issues. Revolutionary Party would use the electoral system to the extent possible to make it well known that most people want an egalitarian revolution. And as we do the above kinds of things, we could also aim to do whatever is required to defend ourselves from those who might physically attack us and discuss our views on violence. Violence in self-defense is often morally right and politically appropriate. We can talk. I have some links that discuss this more in the article that you can link to from Proposition 5. We could talk to people and to each other about the question of leaders and leadership, which I have links to discussions of that. What's good leadership? What's bad leadership? Is there such a thing as good leadership? Are we what's our views about it? We have promote a massive public discussion about this question. We could establish relations of solidarity with egalitarian revolutionaries around the world, because we need an international egalitarian revolution to succeed anywhere. Because even if we remove the rich from power in the United States, the rich in other countries would try to overthrow us. We need to have an egalitarian revolution everywhere. So all of these tactics, which, there's zillions of them, I've only mentioned a sample that I've thought of, are things that people can come up with. They're not hard to do. And they would, when done on a large scale, create the conditions for the growth of an egalitarian revolutionary movement that can truly remove the rich from power. These tactics can implement the strategy aimed at giving people the confidence that is now lacking, confidence from knowing that they are in the vast majority and wanting an egalitarian revolution. This is what will make it possible to remove the rich from power, as I discuss in some detail with a link. Again, Proposition 5 is the article I'm reading from that has that link. But you know what? The hardest part about this strategy is the first step, deciding to implement it. I say, let's do it. Thank you.
Okay, John, thank you very much. Why don't I just read my statement, and it'll close out, kind of bookend our series, and then we can have some Q&A, and then we'll end our recording. John, that was wide reaching, fantastic. You covered two important pieces. One is your logical, rational approach to the argument that people are already in a state of readiness for a project to remove the rich from power. They just don't know it. And we need to talk about it and make it known that it's a possibility. And then you listed a series of tactics, which I haven't read your Substack yet. And you are at, you have the name of your website is People for Democratic Revolution, Boston, PDR, no, say it.
pdrboston.org.
Excellent. And you can, very extensive articles. And then your Substack. Yeah, there it is. Let's remove the rich from power so we're going to real not fake democracy. So pdrboston.org and your John Spritzler Substack, and follow him. So here's my closing remark to the question, what makes the Green Party a winning party? My position is that the Green Party needs to advance a vision for a better society. We need to speak positively for what qualifies as better, while at the same time considering what is especially wrong with society. The Green Party should adopt the remove the rich from power proposition and announce to the world that Greens are committed to advancing a revolutionary possibility for a better society. We should express our commitment to the Green pillars for justice, democracy, peace and not war, and an ecologically sustainable society guided by eco-wisdom. As you all know, I am an advocate for a Green Liberty Caucus. Its primary mission is to advance a liberation coalition that would organize, facilitate participation in a united front for societal betterment and against the corruption spawned by an irresponsible and fundamentally criminal class of plutocrats. By stating a clear intention to remove the rich from power and create a democratic society based on freedom, ecology, and justice, we set our North Star. Greens and others who value freedom need to agree on a common message of redemption for humankind that involves building a society that is democratically determined and rejects categorically the rise of an anti-human and anti-ecological technology movement. I want to emphasize that the people are not clamoring for technocracy. We are not asking for AI to displace workers, nor are we asking for toxins to be dispersed willy-nilly in the name of feeding the world or protecting the planet from global warming. But a movement can't be built as a reaction and must be a proactive effort for the better. We need to envision a society that has humans practicing mutual aid with each other and with nature in a form of symbiosis, where nature regenerates instead of falling into ecological collapse. We need to be clear that building a liberation movement means the people need, we need to be clear what the building a liberation movement means that involves the people being educated in the militant democracy that Emmanuel spoke of in his presentation. Our movement needs to advance a generation of muscular civics led by dedicated activists. I think we need at least 3 million people to agree to liberation to get going, to get started. If we had 3 million, that'd be a great, great, powerful beginning. And without a doubt, we need to reach young people and help them imagine a future of possibilities. At bottom, the task of a liberation movement is to educate about what a militant citizenship would look like. John Spritzler, chief proponent for the People for Democratic Revolution Boston website and Substack author, provides insights and explanations for how activists can get the democracy bus rolling. Moreover, Green Liberty accepts the aspirational ideas for a libertarian municipal movement that would place the city as the locus for an egalitarian revolution. Building hope is critical. John Spritzler emphasizes that people will become hopeful when they see that they are not alone in the goal for making a better society, but it is up to the Liberation Coalition to articulate a clear vision for revolutionary possibilities. My motivation as an activist is to advance a society-wide conversation about making society better, ultimately to transform society into one that is not ruled or driven by the plutocratic power structure. This means the people, through democratic institutions, take control of their democratic destiny to avoid a certain technocratic fate of a techno-totalitarian dystopian society. We have to focus on liberating our cities. However, I recognize that a liberation movement must speak to the core issues people are concerned about in their immediate daily lives. I grapple with this issue in my essay on advancing the Liberation Coalition. I accept that our movement needs to advance core bread and butter issues, and in the essay I suggest housing, healthcare, and education would appeal broadly to the young adults, and especially people with families, into our movement. But after addressing these key bread and butter issues and highlighting them in the context of an egalitarian aspiration to remove the impediment of plutocracy, we should then point to the problem of state crimes, the long history of this elite malfeasance, to make the case for a movement that doesn't give up nor would accept reforms that allow the plutocracy to remain in power. As stated, Greens can win if they led strongly against war and the warmongering of the plutocracy. This is the point Mark Wolfson emphasized, and it is key. We need to explain, as Spritzler does, that the plutocracy doesn't just lead our country into war in order to make profit. They actually breathe war as we breathe air. It would be unnatural for our ruling class to not advance war projects. They do this to divide and conquer and rule society. And as John has argued, the vast majority of people know they are being ripped off. But a Green Party that framed the ripoff as a concerted conspiracy by the plutocracy would tap into a wellspring of readiness to be part of a movement. Michael Parenti is the godfather of the truth movement. With his frank discussion of how the plutocracy operates against the people, we should all periodically listen to his lectures for inspiration. We might also go back to some Lenny Bruce comedy. Finally, I agree that putting the money issue up front would effectively unite people across the political continuum. The banking and monetary reform advanced by Howard is a democratic response to the 1913 Federal Reserve Act. In 1913, private bankers established their hold on the United States currency. This was done in complete reversal of the findings by the Pujo Commission, which found extensive corruption from the financial leaks in the banking and monetary supply system. There's an article that I'll link to that Rita Jacobs wrote at Covert Magazine, Covert Action. In our vision for a better society, we are not beholden to the banking cartels and instead have democratic control of our money supply in all other aspects of society. Our society is tending toward a techno-totalitarianism, even though it may not seem like it to many. The events of 9/11 pushed the Patriot Act, which expanded the surveillance state, and more recently, the COVID, which demonstrated the lengths the authorities would go to test compliance for authoritarian demands from the state. However, I defer to the insights and analysis of David Hughes, Catherine Austin Fitts, and others in the anti-technocracy movement that take the power of technocracy and the transhumanist philosophy it serves very seriously. The Green Movement should explain how a liberation coalition would put a democratic check on the emerging technocracy and the deployment of AI in society. We should assert our liberation movement as the antidote to plutocracy. Our vision for a better society should highlight a return to things natural, whether it be for health and well-being, for protecting food and air from toxins, and for developing holistic approaches to education and healthcare. I conclude with the opening to the Green Liberty Post titled, "Ditch the Rich." The United States Declaration of Independence declares that we, the people, are endowed with inalienable rights to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and that we may from time to time withdraw our consent to be governed when it becomes apparent that the governors are corrupt and oppressive to said inalienable rights. On this political theory, Thomas Jefferson penned and others signed the Declaration of Independence, just as the colonial Americans ditched the King of England and set up a constitutional republic, so today must we, the people, ditch the plutocracy, the 0.01% of wealth holders that corruptly hold power over state agency. Against this, we must create an egalitarian society where there are no rich and no poor, and where we practice real and not fake democracy. Thank you very much for listening. That's the end of my presentation. So that's my verging on a rant. Any Q&A on this? Any thoughts? Any final closing? I suggested that this series of presentations, and I tried to touch on everyone's reports, could produce a statement, a document, and I don't know, Emmanuel, if you want to kind of write a synthesis for what, and is there a consensus? Do we have a real consensus here? Maybe that's the real first question. Do we all agree to ditch the rich? In principle, whatever the gory details look like, but they got to go, just like the king had to go, and just like the abolitionists said, no more slavery. I think John Spritzler turned me on to that historical kind of parallel. Two hands are up. Who do we go first? Emmanuel, go for it, and then Mark Wolofson. Emmanuel, what is your thought?
Oh, well, I really did appreciate the way you brought things together here, Chuck. And I personally think that this whole series of presentations, discussions is extremely valuable. Whether the Green Party survives or whether we pick up some of the remnants of it and put it together as something different is in a way not our problem. But I think we did a pretty good job of putting forth the critical issues. I certainly would be happy to help in drafting some sort of a statement and a call to action. I mean, I already have formulated my own Declaration of Independence, but we might do something different that maybe brings people in. There are some differences, obviously, and I think we have to recognize the differences. I mean, the question about the role of the Constitution, the question of, you mentioned Jefferson. I mean, you were sort of putting your hand deep into the mud there. I mean, there are a lot of people who dismiss all of these people for being slave owners or elites. I personally think, I sympathize with your approach, but I do recognize there are other people who would see it differently.
You mean my sympathetic remark about the founding fathers?
Well, right. So for me, Frederick Douglass said he learned the most about freedom from Thomas Jefferson, and when he said that, he was not being naive. He was fully aware of how Jefferson had supported slavery and all the weaknesses of Jefferson, both as an individual and as part of a ruling class. But he thought that you could save this part, right, of what had been there. And so the founding of the American Republic, in the sense that it does not have a king, it's not run by the church, and it envisions this idea of being governed by, I mean, men is a problem, but it was by individuals who have some sort of commitment to the greater good. That this was basically unprecedented in European history, and it had virtue, so that even people like Ho Chi Minh, who were fighting against imperialism, quoted positively the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. However, the criticisms that John has made, John Spritzler and others, are also totally legitimate. I mean, we had a discussion online about this with John yesterday, anyway, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the conclusion about state crimes. I'm very sympathetic with what John, and we need a synthesis like the Declaration of Independence, whether that was good or bad. And we're gonna have to bring together some different people. It's sort of, you, John, Gloria, Mark. We're like, Jefferson, Hamilton, Madison, etc. For better or worse, but we have slightly different perspectives, and some of what each person says has some legitimacy to it. So regarding state crimes, I mean, for me, the strongest, I understand that John's argument that state crimes in itself doesn't motivate people, and I think that's accurate. However, state crimes have the advantage that you can say, in accord with the law, in accord with the Constitution, federal law, that these people engage in state crimes, i.e., you can seize all their assets legally. And so you don't have to create a revolutionary new government in order to take the money away from the rich. You can do it in accord with the existing laws, and that helps in the transition to an egalitarian society. I guess that's the only thing I want to add about state crimes.
Well, I appreciate that. And I just want to say that I'm agnostic on many points. John Spritzler is, as a radical egalitarian, says, in order to be free, we need to have no money, because money is a means to is to enslave people. Okay, that's and that can and so on. I accept, out of a kind of mercenary interest at having a good issue, the whole energy around democratizing our money supply. Dennis Kucinich is on board with it. So, and I also believe strongly in the transitional project, getting from where we are now to where we want to go. And so I can live with a total, anarchist ambition and aspiration while working on these transitional projects. I accept that our liberation might take a few generations. Maybe a miracle could happen in 10 years. I doubt it. I think, but what we're doing is speaking frankly, forthrightly, and honestly about, what does it mean to live in a better society than what we're experiencing? So thank you, Emmanuel, for those points. Mark, what is your thought? And then I want to ask Gloria a question.
All right. Well, I think the biggest proof that people want to remove the rich from power is the response by the rich. And what we're seeing now, and I want to say that, in response to these ICE protests that broke out in LA, Trump putting the National Guard and the military on the streets. And then at the same time, we've got this concentration camp that just got built in Florida, this Alligator Island, which is supposedly to house dangerous criminal illegal immigrants. But I don't buy that, because there's plenty of ICE detention centers. And if people are that dangerous, they're going to go be tried and thrown in jail or a maximum security prison. This is to send a message, that I think that society, the rich are getting very scared of all the indivisible protests and all the ICE protests and all the student demonstrations, anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian demonstrations. And there's a real effort, you know, to crack down on dissent, especially with the Palestine issue. For example, Trump just sanctioned this UN rapporteur, what's her name, Francesca Albanese. You know, this is the rich is desperate right now to try to maintain control. And then you have, you know, they're very scared because, and Trump was very reactionary about the BRICS summit, you know, and saying he's going to put a 10% tariff on every BRICS country that trades in anything but dollars. But once the dollar collapses and BRICS is, you know, successful in trading their own currencies, the U.S. empire will fall. Western imperialism will fall. And when that happens, you know, there's going to be there's already a backlash. And I think the tariffs, if they kick in and that harms small businesses and harms people, you know, you know, when they go to buy things and all of a sudden they're not able to afford a lot of things they used to afford, then there's going to be that much more uprising. And I think we're at a turning point right now where we may see things happen very quickly that kind of dictate the conditions moving forward. But removing the rich from power is I think is an extremely difficult task, because this is not the days when you can walk out with pitchforks and guillotines and muskets and take care of them. You know, they have AI, they have all this, you know, sophisticated surveillance, you know,
Mark, can I just interject? The assertion, the proposition is aspirational.
Right, but I think we have to be realistic too about.
No, we can be. Mark, let me just finish. Absolutely, we can be realistic.
And we have to basically speak to the ongoing situation that's brewing here and not ignore that we're in a pivotal moment right now. I think Trump has brought this. Some say that he's speeding up the collapse of the U.S. empire, but I think
so. Let's. I don't want to go down rabbit holes right now around. All I want to just what I want to. We're still on a recording. We're still talking about making the Green Party a winning party. We had a wonderful presentation, and what I want to steer us toward is the prospect of a consolidation of statement and position. And
sure, fine. I mean, I think basically we have good ideas. I mean, I think.
Okay, let me just. That's fine. I just want to emphasize that. And so there's the prospect that this statement could come from Green Renaissance as a liberation coalition, because I consider us the Liberation Coalition. We have different organizations where everyone here has kind of followers and tentacles, as it were. And so thinking about a consolidated statement, and to Mark Rawlson's point, we have to be realistic. I think once this goes out in this frank, open discourse, and there will be targeting, and Gloria is expert in identifying that. So we do have to be very mindful, very aware, very careful, very strategic. But we have, exactly as you say, an opportunity to express and speak into the popular kind of consciousness of our era, and there is a readiness and an interest in our message. So.
Right. Let me just add one thing.
You're hearing, and
we just add one thing. You know, right now Elon Musk is talking about starting a new political party, and I think, you know, that's something that we could even mention that. Hey, if you want to remove the rich from power, if you think a third party is a good idea, the last person you want to have, you know, form a third party is a billionaire. I mean, this guy is part of the problem. He's a big part.
He'll be fun to pick on. Gloria, and then John Spritzler, give us a reflection on what you've heard. But let's go to Gloria and then to John Spritzler. Oh, you're muted. Please unmute.
I think, thank you. Very nice presentations and inspiring presentations from both of you. Thank you. I think as long as we stay issue-based, we're all on the same page because, basically it doesn't matter where you come from. We want nice things for our families, for our children, for our grandchildren. We want jobs, we want meaningful work, we want food, we want housing. These are things that everybody wants. It doesn't matter, what your perspective is. People don't want to have their children die in war. People don't want to be killed in war. People do not want to be poisoned by toxic things in the environment. So I think as long as we stay, neither left nor right, but just neutral, focused on really what are our goals as far as, humanitarian goals for us and for everyone. I think that's, a very good direction to be in. And, I was just hearing the conversation, the comments before, and, it goes against, oh, it's the Trump, it's this man, it's that person. The more I study and the more I learn about history and the more that becomes uncovered, the more I see how little an individual really has a role, especially a president. Okay. If you've read war games, which I have, I've read a lot of war games. I was doing some articles in 2018 and I came across the war games that were being done involving different social issues and how to deal with it. And they were discussing, okay, how do we control the population when the dollar crashes? How do we control the population when there's plagues? How do we control the population when there's climate events? How do we control the population when, I don't know, just all a whole variety of things. And they came up with, and this war game that I was looking at was, I don't know, was maybe done in the 70s. And they had it all gamed out as to what they would do. They would build these internment camps and they would do this and do that. This is not like being done under Trump. Trump is just who's ever wearing the hat. This goal didn't change. It wasn't better under Biden. It's the same thing. It's just, I've told this story a few times and I like telling it. And I consider, there's this story and this, it actually involves a rabbi, but it could be a priest, it could be any cleric of your choice. And this guy goes to the rabbi and he's like, my life sucks, everything's terrible. What do I do? And the rabbi says, put a goat in your kitchen and everything will be fine. So he puts a goat in the kitchen and I don't know, a couple of months go by, he comes back to the rabbi. As I said, it could be a priest, could be anything. And he says, God, things are just even worse. This is the worst idea ever. My life's terrible. So what should I do? And he says, well, take the goat out. And sure enough, his life improved when he removed the goat. So I consider Trump, the person who kind of takes the goat out. The Biden administration was going nuts with putting men in women's locker rooms, boys in women's sports, men in women's prisons. It got really insane. And then, the mandated vaccines, not even with any religious objection where you can bypass it. So it got really bad under Biden, just really horrific. And then the lies that we were being told that, that men are women and boys are girls and girls are boys. I mean, everything, every psyop that you could imagine that they devised in Travistock was put on us. And there was a really good episode on Jimmy Dore where he's interviewing a woman that's an MK Ultra survivor. And she talks about the mantras that they kept making her say. There's no man, there's no woman, there's no child, there's no adult. It's this, whole thing of negatives. And so basically that's kind of where we are. So, Trump came in and he basically is getting men out of women's sports, which is a nothing. We made no improvements. These are just, taking a goat out of a kitchen that shouldn't have been in the kitchen in the first place. So, I mean, that's been something that's happened. So I think when we go down these partisan paths of this is the Democrats and they're this way, and then these are the Republicans and they're that way, I think we really alienate. And I think if we have any chance of having any movement, we have to get away from that and just be issue based. As John Spritzler is saying, we're just focusing on removing the rich from power. Let's identify the rich, that's fine. And like Chuck says, let's focus on truth. Let's focus on things that are true. Um, I was making fun of the word liberation today because like the Symbionese Liberation Army. Liberation is kind of like the word democracy in the CIA. It's anytime you want to take over anything or have something that's fake, you call it, for democracy or for liberation, and so
Hey, Gloria,
I
can I
think we
jump
better
in?
be careful with that. That's all. Thank
Let
you.
me just say why I use the word liberation. Um,
It's just been bastardized. It used to
I
be a
think
good word, and so did democracy for that
for
matter.
the same reason I put green next to the word liberty, the word liberty. I've had people in someone
Liberty's good. You
okay,
can't go wrong
listen,
with liberty.
someone in the Green Party. This is my criticism of someone who's um, uh, maybe they're a Marxist. I don't know what they are, but they call themselves progressive socialists, and said, use the pejorative freedom, spelled freedom, FREEDUMB. And so there's a disparagement among lefties of the freedom movement. Just, and it's an odd, but they value justice, but they'll make these odd slurs on libertarians. So I
Yeah,
purposefully put green and liberty together to basically, challenge
I think we're safe
comprehension.
with liberty. Nobody said anything about liberty,
Now,
but yeah,
liberation is a word that is totally legitimate and appropriate. So let's we're going to end our recording just because this is a series and we can just kind of riff on, get into some general conversation. I do want to still focus on one. I want to hear from John Spritzler's reflection. I want to hear his on this, and I want a little discussion on what. And Emmanuel has left. So Emmanuel has offered to be a scribe for a consolidated statement that could come out of Green Renaissance on the question of what could make the Green, and we could have a Green Party, a winning party. We could have a qualifier that questions if it's not already dead, and that the question, is really about something broad. It is about something broader. It's about the movement. So we can frame this, Gloria, so that it doesn't violate your kind of rhetorical or journalistic sense and languaging or that would come out of a Green Renaissance, if you're agreeable. Do you see where I'm getting at, Gloria?
yeah. No, I think it just has to be a broad thing where we're not alienating half our base.
No, we're okay. Then that, and I'll close with this point. Green liberty is fundamentally pragmatic, and because the first demand, well, the mission is Liberation Coalition. The demand is accountability, transparency, protection for whistleblowers. The fourth one is independent media. But those three to fight the corruption that rots out our republic. That's a pragmatic. Anyone can, across the left-right continuum, there's like, well, yeah, of course I want accountability. Of course I want, of course. And then it comes down to the issue. Well, do you want that about the COVID? Do you want that about 9/11? Do you want that about the JFK assassination? That's where the cognitive dissonance gets hammered. But if it's about what's in my food, well, yeah, duh, the law says so. So that's my thought. John Spritzler, and then Judith has her hand up. John Spritzler, would you reflect on the comments, what you're hearing, this idea of a consolidated statement, building movement?
Sure. We've a lot of things have been said in the last hour, and a lot of what was said is analysis about what's happening in the world, why it's happening, what's likely to happen in the future. And I enjoy doing that as much as the next person. And as some of you have seen, I even have a crystal ball that allows me to look into the future. to see what's going to happen. Unfortunately, it only works 20 minutes in the future. I'm still working to improve my use of it. But as important as that kind of conversation, arguably more important, is the question, what is to be done? What are we going to do to make the future the better future that we want? And frankly, I see people shying away from that question, not wanting to really grapple with it. When I say what is to be done, I mean, what can I, as a single individual, do to help build a movement that can change the world? I've tried to answer that question concretely, and I suggest other people do the same. What can a handful of people do? Concretely, actually, realistically. You know, what can 100 people do? 1,000 people, 100,000, 1,000,000? But it starts with the question of what can I do? And the answer is not to just keep talking with people about what's going on in the world and why it is and what might happen in the future. The answer, I think, is to have a plan, a strategy that you carry out on the street, literally on the street with your neighbors, where you live, to build a movement that can change the world. And I've thought for literally decades about how to do this. I've developed my thinking, and I've carried it out in practice. You know that. You've seen the videos of me doing it. You've heard me report on what I've been doing. You've seen the evidence of the photos I've collected of people and so forth. The question is, what is to be done? And what I'm hearing is an evasion of that question. And I think that the evasion of that question is probably rooted in a sense of fatality, that, well, there isn't really anything we can do. Let's not fool ourselves. We're not going to really have any significant effect. What I do tomorrow and the next day on the street's not going to make any difference. So the only thing left is to just sort of talk about things. And I disagree with that. Call me naive if you want, call me foolish if you want. But if people are going to make an egalitarian society with no rich and no poor, it's going to be because they decided to do something and that they did it. And I think that if we're not having conversations about what we ought to do, really do, not just abstract conversations, yeah, people should do X. That's not what is to be done kind of conversation. It's what should I do tomorrow, and maybe I can do it with you if you live in the same neighborhood. That's a what is to be done conversation. And I've tried to advocate it. I've tried to illustrate it. I've been as concrete as I could possibly be. I'm telling people what I actually am doing, and I'm urging people to do the same thing. But the funny thing is, when I do that, people don't say, "Oh, John, I see what you're doing, but I don't think it's a good idea. Here's why I don't think it's a good idea. I think I should do this instead." No, that's not what happens. What happens is absolute ignoring what I'm advocating, just completely pretending that they didn't even hear it. It's very frustrating, and I'll end on that note.
Thank you, John, for your reflection on our series. Perhaps you would work with Emmanuel to produce a consolidated statement from this on the points where there is. I think there's some good information in all this. Your remarks and your counsel and what you've represented. And would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, I'm always willing to talk about things with people.
Okay, well, I'll hook you up with Emmanuel. And Gail, Judith had her hand up, and then Gail, and then we're gonna let's and then we're going to end our recording and we can hang out and chat. Judith, what is your thoughts? Is it about the question of making the Green Party a winning party, or is it an off topic about what's going on in the world? Because I want to keep the remarks in our recording relative to the theme. Judith, you're muted.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let
Well,
me tell you a very brief story. On the 4th of July, I like fireworks, so I looked to see if there were any fireworks in my neighborhood. And what did I find? But on the lake at the kosher sushi joint, they were having fireworks to celebrate the 4th of July, and the theme was Stand Up for Israel. So, needless to say, I did not go, and I spent the 4th of July communing with the fireflies in the forest, and they put on a show. Although there are very few fireflies left. There used to be hundreds and hundreds of them all the time, but now maybe a couple of dozen.
That's
Any,
sad.
yeah. Anyway, another story.
Wait, Judith,
What?
the theme of our meeting is
All right, wait. You'll
just
hear.
make it relevant.
You'll
And then
you will hear. Um, this is in relation to the American Revolution. I just heard this tonight. It seems that there are in the entire history of Hollywood, there are, I think, supposedly only two movies about the American Revolution. However, in 1917, a German Jewish refugee came and made a movie about the American Revolution, and he called it The Spirit of 1776. So, the United States government removed this movie. It destroyed all copies of it, and it put him in jail for treason. And the reason was because England was our ally in the First World War, and they didn't want they didn't want the truth revealed that we had actually fought a war against England, because England was now one of the good guys. And so unfortunately, this poor man, his name was Goldstein, he went back to Germany, and he was killed by the Nazis. So, but they had a court case, and the court case was called The United States versus the Spirit of 1776, which was the name of the movie.
thank you for that, Judith. We should look that up. Gail, a thought from you?
I have more to say.
Wait, Judith, I want to end the recording for our conversation about making the Green Party a winning party.
Okay, all right. I want to ask you a question.
Is it
This is
about that?
It's about the Green Party. Yes.
Okay.
Why do you insist on clinging to the Green Party as a vehicle?
Very good question, very apropos our theme. As I've said before, the Green Liberty Caucus works within the Green Party and outside the Green Party to advance a liberation coalition. And that means a liberation movement of some sort or another. So I'm not clinging to the Green Party. The Green Party might be a dead organization, even though there's people who participate in it, and it may be going nowhere. But it remains a possibility that it could become libertarian and shake off the shackles of authoritarianism that it is plagued by from a certain type of person and people who are a command and obey, authoritarian-minded people. They have been an impediment in the kind of conversation we're having here. They at Green Party organizations would not have this conversation because they're all locked into kind of Democrat Party light. They're locked down lefties and so on. So I'm not clinging, Judith. I'm playing the field wide and broad. Is what I'm doing. Let's go to Gail, and then we're going to end our recording, and we can have general conversation.
Okay, well, I just wanted to comment as an observer. This is my first time here, so I'm just kind of like getting the picture here. And some thoughts that I had, I agreed with the platform. I agree with John's tactics. I've used some of them myself. So I've ran like 10 local campaigns and been successful with most of them using the kind of tactics that John is talking about. All grassroots, successful until the issue gets too big, and then you got the money coming in, and there's nothing you can do about that, unless, you know, as Hillary's platform was, get rid of Citizens United. That's the only thing that's going to help in local campaigns and state and federal campaigns. So I just wanted to share that. And even when my last campaign where I ran for city council, I did have like big engineering consultant companies and developers coming after me because I was trying to change things for the better. And I would have attorneys, the city attorney, come up to me and say, "You took an oath to uphold the state laws, so you can't change anything." I mean, those are the things that I hear. And so I just want to make you aware of that. And even when those dirty campaigns come in and you go to the FPPC or the political practice and complain about it, filed complaints, they can lie. Anybody can lie. It's not against the law to lie in campaigns. Anyway, but as far as the big picture goes, I support everything you're trying to do. My only suggestion would be more simplicity. The platform and the 6 pieces of the platform or the issues could be more simplified to make it easier to understand. So that's all I had to say. And thanks for inviting me and letting me observe the meeting.
Gail, thank you for participating and being present and bearing witness to people grappling with wanting society to be different. And what you described being a frontline elected official is what you're saying. You were elected. And, you know, for me, I think what we're talking about is building a movement so that you wouldn't be alone, that anybody who gets elected to office, anybody who's running for office, they know they've got this huge movement behind them. And that's what you needed to know as an elected official. You needed that movement. So I support people running for office using the electoral as a bully pulpit and describing the movement and promoting it to worldwide, you know. So John Spritzler, you have your hand up. What's your thought?
I just wanted to say that I thought what Gail said was really interesting. The part about the Attorney General, if I got the title right, telling you
City attorney.
What?
City attorney.
City attorney, yeah. Telling you that in order to become mayor, you had to swear an oath, and the oath was that you had to support the laws, and the laws were the problem. And I think that this is, I've never heard it stated so clearly as you just did. Never had anyone bring it to my attention the way you just did. And I think that it's an extremely important point to be talked about, fleshed out, and for wide public discussion, about the significance of it, because it's very significant. Our elected people in the executive offices, at least, swear an oath to not do what needs to be done, and that's a big problem. And what's the solution? I mean, this is. I'm really glad that you brought it to my attention.
Well, so you were being told that the law, Gail, that the law is the law.
Mhm.
And you, as the mayor, could not practice a kind of jury nullification. You needed to be loyal and you're loyal to law. Is that correct?
Yeah, because my platform was, had some change elements in it, and every time I tried to move things forward, yeah, I was
You were
shut down.
You were shut down. Yes. Well, you were in the front
Wait,
line of
What
struggle.
was some of the change that you put forward that they really pushed back on?
Well,
Give us-
one thing that happened was they went to put a cell tower right in the middle of town. And the planning commission just approved it with no public hearings or anything. And so as the mayor, I said, no, wait a minute, we need to have a public hearing about this, just to let the public be informed of what's happening. And so when I got it on the agenda, which was a challenge, the planning commission, they quit en masse because I had usurped their authority. And then the night of the hearing, the public hearing, the entire front row of the council chambers was filled with lawyers from AT&T, Verizon, all of them. And they got up to the podium and they said, we have the federal law, the FEC says we can put our cell towers any way we want, anywhere we want, anytime we want. There's nothing you can do about it. And if you challenge this, we will sue your city into bankruptcy. That's what they publicly said that. So that's what you're up against at every level.
Right.
I mean, this was just a tiny little town with one little cell tower.
Well, could I just say that this is a classic example of why we should have the egalitarian principle of local sovereignty of assemblies of egalitarians. If that were the case, there would be no federal government with greater power than your local assembly of the egalitarian people. And if they thought it was a bad idea to put up the cell tower somewhere, then the cell tower would not get put up. But that's an egalitarian revolutionary solution.
Let's end on that note. We're just going to end our recording. We'll hang out and chat. We've been talking about our series on making the Green Party a winning party. There's been challenges to the value of the Green Party in and of itself, but it's all part of a big conversation about building a liberation coalition. I'm Chuck Fall. You have been at a Green Renaissance Thursday meetup, and this is the end of our recording.